Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Mark McRae, and he is an advisor, a leader in the space, been in the space for 30 years. I'm glad to have you here. I'm looking forward to learning from you. Where are you at right now? I'm in the Redwood Forest of Northern California. You're in a really cool place. Where are you located?
Well, thanks for having us, first of all, Ron. So I'm in Australia, north of Brisbane in Queensland, which is on the east coast of Australia, and a place called the Sunshine Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So we get about 300 days of sunshine here, so it's good weather.
Let's get started with kind of telling people who you are, where you're from, what you've done, the kind of the origin story, and let's get people to kind of know who you are.
No worries. So as you can probably hear by the accent, I'm originally from Scotland, born in Glasgow. My mother and father were market traders. So they sold things in the markets, scar cushions, lighters, you name it. And that was really my first entry into business, was standing in the market selling things. And I remember when I was 7 years old, I noticed that the people who were walking around the markets, they never brought anything to carry the things that they bought. So as a kind of side hustle, I went and I bought 1,000 carrier bags at 10 cents each and sold them at 20 cents each. Made like £10, £20, then £30, until the point that just before I was 8, I was actually making more than my mother and father. So I've kind of been hustling ever since then. But my first kind of career or job was in casinos. So I started off in Glasgow as a croupier or a dealer. And from there, I progressed to South Africa and one of the largest casinos at the time, which was Sun City, and eventually became a pit boss there. And from there, I progressed to I took a share in a casino, and then eventually had 2 or 3 casinos of my own. That took me to basically around the world. Landed up in Central America for a bit in Costa Rica. Went back to the UK, and in the UK, I studied and became a derivatives trader. And this has gone back to 98, the late 90s, just as the internet was taken off. And um, after I became a derivative trader, I got in contact with a lot of people, and somebody suggested I write a book about trading. So I wrote a book about trading, and online it became a bestseller, Trading for Beginners. I wrote a few more. Then people who were interested in that field, institutions and other traders, asked me if I could help them do the marketing. That developed into a marketing company and then a publishing company that took me to different parts of the world. And in between that, I've probably owned or bought over 30 different businesses in different parts of the world. So it gives me a kind of interesting perspective when I'm talking to people from around the world and when I'm trying to promote products, because I don't think you really get to know people until you live with them for a long time. You can't go to the States and have a holiday in New York and say you know America. I mean, each state is unique, and the East Coast is different from the West Coast, and so on. You really got to live in places to understand it at least a little bit. So I think that has given me a unique perspective on how to do business online, because I can appreciate other people, gives me more reference points. And that's kind of took me to here in Australia. I still have businesses that go back 20, 25 years, but along the way, I have learned about business. I have bought businesses. I have made more mistakes than anybody else I know. So I've had some good things and bad things happen to me along the way. But I always feel privileged, Ron, because I think I'm doing exactly what I should be doing. There's nothing else I would rather do. I can't sing, I can't dance, I have no other talent, I'm virtually unemployable, but I love doing what I do. I love the concept and the idea that you and I can have a conversation now, and tomorrow we could be in business together and making money or making things happen or be philanthropic. But you can take a concept, and I have the freedom and the network to make things happen. So that's what I'm really happy about. I think I'm in the right place at the right time in my life.
It's awesome, and you've been to enough locations and stuff, you have a breadth of knowledge that a lot of people wouldn't. I've interviewed a bunch of people who have done international travel. I wouldn't say I have. I've lived in the United States, lived as far as Hawaii, been to Acapulco, been to Mexico a few times, but that's probably the furthest I've been. I think I wanna travel more, now that I got young kids. They're getting of the age where it's probably safer. Like, I've got a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old now, so that's pretty
Right.
decent. But I think there's a unique perspective in seeing other cultures, seeing other marketplaces, seeing how they interact. There's some value learned. I have a entrepreneur friend who does really well by he travels, then he finds really cool products that are doing well in other areas that you've never seen in the United States. He contacts the manufacturer, gets a license agreement, and drags them back here. And he has a pretty much a it's online now, but it used to be in person where he would basically own the license and then get other people to retail it for him. But he just finds stuff that's doing well in other places, like, "Hey, Americans would like that too." But, the one thing that caught my ears when you were giving your story that I didn't know before we got on here is that you were in the casino business. There are
Hmm.
2 businesses I've always looked at thinking, "One of these days, I probably should get in that. They look like they make a lot of money," and that's casinos and banks, right? Because they always have marble floors and beautiful they gotta be making money because 'cause they're always building, they're always becoming bigger. Banks are having a little trouble right now because 'cause they're over leveraged, but, you know, is the casino business as profitable as they make it look?
It was in my day. I think it's a lot more regulated. It's designed in such a way that if there's that much profit, you're going to get clobbered with tax. And the world is different now. I mean, we
Yeah,
used to deal in cash. And casinos don't really have cash that much anymore. The hard part about the whole casino thing, is getting a license.
yeah.
So the fact is, you open a casino somewhere, they call it the honeymoon period, you're going to do exceptionally well. But to get to that point is extremely difficult. And I traveled looking specifically for a casino license to countries like Zimbabwe, Angola, Zambia, Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, lots of countries that I thought were semi legal and they were credible enough where you could do things. And I dodged a bullet in a few places like Zimbabwe. I'm glad it never happened there.
It's like, I think
Uh,
that place is rough, right?
oh, yeah. And it's one of those things that seems to attract a particular type of people. There was a time in those days, that was it. You wanted those people who wanted an airplane, a ship, and a casino or a boat. But because it was my first career, I became obsessed with it.
Mhm.
So, it wasn't a case of I knew everything about that particular industry. Very few things I would consider myself an expert in, and I would no longer consider myself an expert in casinos. But at that time, I was so involved and engrossed with it. I knew how tables were made. I knew how the chips were made. I could do any job in that casino. I was one of the first people to learn car counting, right? So, and there was a book, Beat the Dealer by, his name escapes me just now. And he wrote a book about car counting. And as a very young man, I read that book. And in that particular casino organization, I was the only person who had read that book. People didn't read. When you were a manager of a casino there, you just got knowledge passed on to you. And I could spot car counters because I did that. And that helped me get promoted. So then I read books on marketing and applied marketing to some of the very old traditional ways that they used to do business in casinos, which is basically just open the doors and see what happens, to put some kind of events in there. And that also helped me kind of skyrocket through the casino industry. And it gave me a good footing. So when I did eventually open my own casino, I was 100% confident. I knew that was going to work well, because I knew not just how to run the casino part. I knew that parking was important, bathrooms were important, lots of different things. So I was very comfortable in that industry for a long time.
It's interesting. So you've made it from, you know, marketplace. When I in my vision, my when you say marketplace, I'm thinking like a street market, like when you were a
Yeah.
kid, to
This was rough, Ron. I mean, this is Glasgow in winter when it's cold. I mean, I remember there was one guy, I'm standing in the middle of the street selling carrier bags, and people, even though they needed carrier bags, they hated paying for it because they thought it was just something you shouldn't pay for. And people used to just sit and abuse me. They used to say, Dick Turpin wore a mask, you little shit.
Mhm.
And they would like carry on. And you got to know characters there, and you got to know a good business principle. So it was a great foundation.
I bet it was because developing a thick skin makes you good for sales, right? Being told
Yeah.
no, being a little verbally abused is probably a good training ground for being decent at sales, right? Uh, some of
Yeah.
the best salespeople I've ever seen in my life come from the United States. They have a door-to-door salesman that sell knives called Cutco or vacuums,
Mm,
Hoover vac, not Hoover. What's the other one? Rainbow vacs. Those people
mhm.
get the door slammed in their face day in and day out. But if they succeed and they make six figures in that, you want to recruit those people all day long. Right, if I've got a sales job opening and somebody says, "I used to work for Cutco," I'm like, "Okay, what did you make in your before you left? What was your finishing salary?" And if it's good, I know they can sell, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I've always been envious of the American accent because whenever I try to sell something, half the time they're asking me to repeat it. But the Americans always sounded as though they were exciting to.
So,
Yeah.
let's go into, like, we were talking a little bit before the show. You've bought a lot of businesses, you've been around a lot. How do you know like, what is your process for choosing the right business? What do you how do you go about looking at something and thinking that's the right one?
I think it's different now from what it was before, because what it was before was kind of arrogance and ignorance, brute force and ignorance, is that anything I thought could make money, I'd have a go at. And that's where I had more failures probably. And now, number one, I'm a lot more patient and do a lot more study and investigation and due diligence. But I have to believe that I can add some value there. So, for example, marketing, right? So, the having a marketing company, it lends itself to a lot of different things. But one of the mistakes I see people who are in M&A, and I think even the word M&A is a kind of misnomer. I think that when you're talking to people about deals in business, you should really be a deal maker and looking for the opportunity in every conversation if you're in that space. So people that get into that space, usually the first thing they say is, "I need a marketing company," but they don't understand how digital marketing works, and it's one of their biggest mistakes, I think, is to try and acquire a marketing company. And to give you an idea, Ron, a couple of years back, even though I owned a marketing company, I wanted to start to do a bit of a roll up, look
Mhm,
for other ones to bring into the organization. So we looked at probably 3,000 marketing companies. And over a period of 3 months, I had 150 conversations. And of those 150 conversations, I realized, number one, even though I'd owned a marketing company for over 20 years, I didn't know as much about marketing as I thought. And because I spoke to people who were in things I'd never even dreamt of, marketing that specialized in agricultural things, marketing that specialized in alcohol. So I spoke to a whole bunch of people who were in a different kind of stream of marketing. But over those 150 conversations, what I found was that something like 80% of those people, they did $1 million turnover with an EBIT of say 250,000, unless it was a SEO company, and then that would have a higher margin, maybe 45%. But the vast majority of them, and I'm thinking 98%, no longer had a traditional office with staff because they didn't have good utilization of staff. So, for example, going back maybe 10 or 15 years, you would have, maybe not that long, but you would have experts for different things. You would have experts for Google, experts for Facebook, experts for this, that, and the next thing. But now it's more generalist and it's all outsourced. So of those 150 conversations, there was only two companies, both in the States, that actually had traditional offices with 10, 20, 30, 40 staff. Now, if you're thinking that and you're an M&A and you need a marketing company, that's what you get. You actually land up with a group of outsourced people. And if you're not familiar with that, it can be difficult to control.
Yeah, I have a similar experience. And when I took the 2 courses I told you about before the show and came out my master's degree, my MBA is in marketing. That wasn't doing me very much service as a small business owner, so I went and got trained by, the guerrilla marketing guys, Jay Conrad Levinson's group, and I was one of his coaches for a little while. I went through his certification, became a Jay Conrad Levinson, if you know what it is, it's the guerrilla marketing coaching, where low cost, high impact marketing strategies. Because basically, an MBA in marketing makes you a good employee for Coca-Cola, but doesn't do very good for your small, medium business. Branding is not a term that should be on the tongue of somebody who's not generating a profit yet. Right. That's a soapbox I'll get on. Other than that, so we did a marketing roll up. A group of us got together. We're thinking we should try to do a roll up. We all worked together. We did what you did. We were targeting bigger agencies. So we were hyper focused on targeting, $1 million EBITDA, as close to $1 million EBITDA to $4 to $5 million EBITDA companies because we're doing a larger roll up. And we had some people on our team that had led some of the world's largest marketing agencies. We had two advisors we brought on that were like, I can't say who their name are because of NDA and stuff, but they were top guys. And the same thing is, I learned a lot about the industry. There was all kinds of stuff like you were talking about, event marketing agencies that all they did is they set up events and do the promotions for the events and just 3D graphics inside of the events and displays and just all kinds of stuff. PR agencies versus non-PR agencies and online, offline, just all the different angles of it. So we quickly had to focus in on looking at things like we were looking at building our anchor product and tagging in the smaller agencies that did specialties. So
Mhm.
finding a really good 25 million anchor company who pretty much broad general did most of it. And then we were going to tag in a lot of these, like the event planning and the other stuff. But I'll tell you, it was so, I think the biggest problem, I'm trying to watch how I word this because I'm not trying to be mean to marketing agencies. Male, female run, man or woman, doesn't matter, whatever gender you want to call it these days. That's another topic. All marketing agency owners have egos and they think they're the best in the world at what they do. So getting them to work with each other and want to work with each other was an interesting conversation.
It
Um,
always is. It's the same as SaaS companies.
yep.
They're all prima donnas. They're all have to be handled. It's like trying to herd cats. But that brings up a good question. So you've got this, you were targeting $25 million companies. How do you fund it?
So we were looking at a waterfall model. So basically, we were only taking it was true roll up in the sense that we were bringing them in under one valuation with a 3 to 5 year
All
plan
right.
to sell it, and we only got to. It was fairly convoluted. We actually not convoluted, complex. We had attorneys that set it up, but it was a waterfall model where we only participated in the uplift from where they came in at their current valuation versus where we sold it in 3 to 5 years. I'm not going to pretend I know that or talk on it too deep because we had other people on the team that had other,
Sure.
tens of thousands of dollars worth of legal expenses that set that up.
Hmm.
So, and at that point, I was just nodding, going, "Okay." Lawyer said this is good, and market agencies seemed to like it. We talked to close to 200 plus agencies that fit our criteria, and then towards the end of the project, we had 2,600 LOI. So, and
Really
in the
excellent.
process that doing in the process of due diligence, where it ended up is two of our partners decided we had too many CEOs in the mix, and I don't disagree. We had 8 people who had all been CEOs in the past, be in the leadership of this company, and they bought the rest of us out. They wanted to do it on their own, and they're still chugging along, I believe.
I
But
think there's two good points there. I mean, one point is that if you're going to do something like a roll up, it can be a good way for people to get into. The advantage of it is you can do it. You don't need that much money if you do it through options and other technical ways to buy those. The disadvantage is, of course, it can be quite complex. But that's one of the things I think that people don't understand about mergers and acquisitions is the funding part.
yeah,
Because I talk to a lot of people who want to get involved in this field. And I encourage everybody to get involved in this, is that they forget that you need money. So somebody who comes into M&A and they say, okay, I'd like to buy a company, but they should be spending really 80% of the time looking for investors.
right.
Because even if they find it, it's not always easy to make that deal happen unless you've got access to money.
It's interesting. That model was truly kind of a zero down deal for all those agencies, and they
Mm,
were signing up for it. But we still needed money. We spent tens of thousands of dollars on legal fees, and we were raising money for legal fees because getting through people through legal due diligence and financial due diligence on that level, with that kind of liability of that big of a deal was tens of thousands, per deal, probably closer to 100 grand per agency we would have brought in the lifetime value of what we spent on legal and due diligence and all the contracts and all the stuff we'd have to spend. We were raising money for that. That,
and the people don't understand that either.
uh
As a rule of thumb, let's say you're spending 3% in legal and accounting. When people try to put a deal together, a lot I find legal is easier to get people to do things at risk. In other words, you can say to somebody, if the deal happens, I'll pay you and I'll even give you 10% above it. And
mhm.
if it doesn't happen, I'll give you nothing. Accountants, not so much. They like want the money. They just don't like to play so much. But you have to take that into account when you're doing a deal.
The other aspect of that is a lot of those agencies, there's a sweet spot inside of marketing agencies for anybody considering doing roll-ups that they can't get past. So agencies kinda have about a 5 to 10 million, depending on the industry, about a 5 to $10 million kinda glass ceiling they have a hard time breaking through, meaning that they're not big enough to bid on the big contracts, but they have talent that they've grown over the years that are ready for them. So now they're gonna either have to go get a big contract or lose their talent. So that's the one of the reason a lot of these guys were motivated. We were playing in
Yeah.
the sweet spot where they were losing talent daily because they wanted to their talent wanted to go work on a project like Coca-Cola, but they
Mm,
weren't big enough to bid on that. They had the skill set. They were good at what they did. But you go into a Coca-Cola or a company like that and you've got 10 employees that look at you like you're not even big enough to help us. You're not big enough to qualify to bid. I'll tell you the lesson I learned. The main lesson I learned is we never needed to go that big. Top
yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, and it's easier to do smaller deals, or
Yep.
you can do more of them. I forgot the principle of a roll up is to add value.
Mhm.
There has to be a reason why people want to do that thing. It has to be improved profit somewhere. And so I would try to bend over backwards and make these things happen. And sometimes it's just not there. Sometimes the margins are too thin, or there's no practical way to really add value there. I think my big thing was to make sure if you are going to do a roll up, that there's enough margin for everybody to eat.
One of the things I did, I called probably about 100 family offices and private equity companies to figure out kinda do a deal placement for them, be an introducer or get an introduction fee, when I was trying to figure out I wanted to evaluate a bunch of industries and figure out which one I wanted to be in. I thought, "Hey, there's a good way I can make some money while I'm doing it." And most of them told me that I'll be honest, I talked to probably 100, most of them said they don't wanna write a check under 50 million. Most of
It's the
those
same work for them to do that as to do
yeah.
something small, so they don't do it.
That's what they told me. Exactly. It's the same amount of work to do a 50 million to $100 million purchase than it is to do a $5 million when you're playing too small. Because I was playing with what I learned and looking to, like, what do you need to acquire? So that's another one to look at is, if you're trying to raise capital or you try to do something like that, who you call, you gotta figure out what's interesting to them, right?
Mm,
When do they start being interested? The family offices and the, private equity firms, they don't seem to be interested in that, unless it's 50 million or above, 25 million or above. That moves their needle. So,
I think I mean, they didn't really have search funds, or I don't ever remember seeing them when I was younger. But I think that can be a good way for people to go, especially if we've got some experience in business.
would you brought up an interesting term earlier, and I like the term. There's all these terms we fly around ETA, which is entrepreneurship through acquisition. There's acquisition entrepreneur, AE, but you said deal maker, and I like that because I think it opens the doors to not just acquisitions, but all kinds of like contract for equity, joint venture deals. You're looking for how to make a deal that works for you and the client. So, what's your idea of a deal maker? That phrase you used.
Well, let's say you're actively going out there looking for a deal. If you were to randomly go to LinkedIn and talk to 100 business owners for an acquisition, at 98% of them, well above 95% of them, are not interested. They didn't wake up thinking I'm going to sell my business. And there's a very small slice of people who are at retirement age, or they for some reason they do want to sell. So the majority of people that you're going to talk to have no interest in that. But during that conversation, you're going to learn things. Maybe they're looking for a CEO. Maybe they want to expand. Maybe they want to acquire things. Every conversation is going to open the door to 100 different things. And if you're switched on, you can put things together. I can't tell you how many people I've introduced. No hidden agenda, just said, I spoke to Ron. He was looking for an entry into SaaS. I know that you're looking for an investor or you want to sell or whatever. So if you're thinking in terms of not, I just want to buy that company, but I'm open to any deal, then, and it's the same as when you own a business. You're constant that every business owner in the world needs something. If you asked any business owner, what do you need right now? It might be staff, it might be they have a supply chain issue, they all need something. So you can be the solution, and that solution can get you equity. And just on that point, Ron, what I found was of every 100 people that you speak to, only about somewhere between 2 to 5% of people are genuinely interested in selling their business. And then you're going to get about another 5% who right away say, we're looking for money to grow the business. They know they're looking for money. But 90% of the people you talk to are looking to grow, but they don't know how. So again, if you're looking for a low entry into getting equity into companies and you've got a skill and that's where I found I accidentally was I wanted to talk to a company about buying them and they would tell me, we don't want to sell, we want to grow. What would we need to give you for you to be involved with us and help us grow? So it's that exchange of knowledge for equity, I think, is a great opportunity for people who want to be involved in M&A, but they don't have a lot of capital, but they do have experience.
It's interesting. I considered at one point doing like a being a what they I think they got a nickname for it or a name for it called a paid search firm. So if a company wanted to grow through acquisition, they could work with me and I'll pull together a team. We go find something for you to acquire and help you acquire it. The problem I see with that because I would look for companies that would want to acquire more than one. So maybe one a year for the next few years or one or two a year for the next few
Mhm.
years. Problem with that is you have to really deep dive into that company and I'd either need managerial responsibility of the company to some extent because the integration of it, you're not going to get the second one if they can't integrate and make that acquisition profitable. And it's not as easy as they'd like to tell you in the courses or something. You're $1 million company, you buy $1 million company or a $500,000 company. It's not instantly overnight a $1.5 million company.
Mm.
Right? There's usually a lot of people won't tell you, there's usually a dip right after the acquisition where the employees are kinda scattered and confused. The market's maybe a little scattered and confused, and you gotta recover from that and integrate that in and regain the trust of both customers and employees.
Well, I think that's a very interesting point because what I see is people who they get excited about acquisitions, they get excited about buying businesses, but there's different, and I also have a different approach to sending letters of intent or
Mhm.
heads of agreement. There a lot of people in that process, they get to the beginning of a conversation and then send the LOI, and then nothing really happens until that's accepted. But those type of deals, in my experience anyway, they have the highest probability of falling over. I won't send an LOI until I've almost done a deep dive into the business, spoken to the person, agreed on terms, and then send the LOI. That has a higher probability of success. But if you look at it in three stages, you're kind of doing a search to find companies, you're going through the legal framework to make that deal happen. But then you've got what happens next. And what happens next is the hard bit in some ways, because, and again, it depends on size. If you're nearly everything I've ever bought has been self-funded. And my basic philosophy is I buy revenue. I'm not really interested in buying a business that has potential. I'm
Right.
not interested in startups. I'm not interested in what woulda, coulda, or shoulda. I want to buy money, right? At a discount rate. That's what I'm looking to do. And sometimes when you're starting, you have to get you roll your sleeves up and just get involved and really take over, but you can still fuck up. I mean, I bought a company this year and I was convinced I had done it right. I thought for the first time ever, I've really got this. I've done enough of them. And within a week, all the staff left. And I couldn't believe it. It's like, wow. I mean, I actually sat down with some people, promised them equity in the company. The person swore on their firstborn child they wouldn't leave. We made plans. We had it all planned out, and then the next day they just wouldn't come back for whatever reason. So there was something that I had missed,
Mhm.
but what it did was it put me in a position where I had to take over the operations of that organization for the first 60, 90 days. So I think it's that taking over the companies can be the hard part. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes everything works out the way that it should. But normally there are skeletons that you never thought of. There will be things happen that you never thought of, sometimes intentional, but the majority of things that go wrong when you take over are things that neither you or the seller thought of. Something
Right.
popped up.
That's startling that they would do that, and it happens all the time. That's the number one, like, topic we talk about integration is the here in the United States, where you just used the phrase earlier on revenue is turnover, that's what they call turnover. Here in the United States, when we say turnover, we're talking about employees leaving. So a
Mm,
turnover of 5% means if I have 100 employees, 5 of them leave every year, right? I have
right.
a yearly turnover of 5% of my staff. So there's for those that are listening that when he says turnover, he means, revenue, and I'd say
Yeah.
turnover, I'm talking about people leaving, churn, or what do
Revenue.
you call it? It is very common, and communication is the only thing that can slow that down, like pre-closing, and like, but sometimes you can talk and build rapport with the employees, and they're still going to do what they do.
Well, one thing we never considered, and may be helpful for people who would be listening, is that the company we took over was a national company that shrunk when the owner had a heart attack. So he
Mm.
kind of shrunk it down. And the staff had been running the organization for about 2 years. So they had it easy. There was no supervision, no management, no drive, nobody trying to make the company work really. And then when we took over, it's a different attitude. Now we actually want things to happen. And people left because they had to do a day's work.
Ah,
So too much for them.
what is the rule of thumb that I keep hearing from all of you guys that I interview? Don't change anything in the first 90 days you own a business. Just watch,
Mm.
just observe, right? Observe and learn. 90 to 180 is what I've been told, right? I get it now. They said for the first 90 to 80 days, 90 to 180 days, your whole job is to learn what they're doing and build rapport with them. Yeah, and then
That's true.
yeah.
I agree with that.
And the second one, the lesson I learned from that, they said, when you're ready to make changes, interview every single person in the company, figure out what changes they want to make, and start with the ones that align. The changes you think need to be made and the ones that they think need to be made, because they'll think the idea was theirs and they'll do it better. So you always start with those first, and that's what you warm them up with. And I never thought about that, but that was brilliant. I forgot which one of the guests that said it, but it was brilliant. Like there's some you're going to have alignment when you look at things over. Those employees know what need to change, right? So go down, interview every one of its key players at least, depending on how big the company is, figure out what they think needs to be done, and then look at your list of what you think needs to be done, and whatever's in alignment, start with those because you'll
Well, one of the great tools, I've never heard it used before, so I'm going to claim I invented it, is that if you have a reasonable size number of staff and you're trying to build that culture that you want, is to get, and I'm going to ask you this, so think about it. So, is to get the entire group together and on a whiteboard, divide the whiteboard into two sections. And on one section, ask every person individually, who's the one person that you admire? And it could be a fictional person, it could be from the future or the past or wherever. And what is it that you admire about them? So, let me ask you that question. Who's the one person you can think of that you admire?
the one person. Well, I read so many books and so many different things. It'd be odd in the entrepreneur space. I would tell you it was Chanel O'Kill, and you wouldn't think that, but the guy's bought 400 companies. He's a philanthropist. He gives and buys kids stuff, but everybody thinks of Shaquille as a basketball player. He owns over 400 companies at this point. He owns pizza, Papa John's, franchise, a lot of franchises, but he also does good in the community, takes care of his family and stuff. And he doesn't wear that. He doesn't wear his money on his sleeve as a lot of other people. He dresses normally. Yeah, he drives fancy cars. He can. He lives in a big house, but you know,
Well,
I
that's a good
think
example, a
yeah.
natural leader. But what's the one thing you admire about him?
The one thing I admire about him is S stay in s stay in touch with normal regular people, mom and dad,
Humility, maybe, right?
the humility, that's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for, like, a kid
Mhm.
walks up and wants to play with him, he'll bend down and play with that kid,
All right. So if you have an entire team of people who tell you the people and
Hmm.
the one characteristic like humility, honorability, or whatever,
Hmm.
that then you can say to them, that is the soul of our company.
Hmm.
All of these characters that you admire from these different people, that's who we are. So when you talk to our customers, think of this, think about being honest, think about having integrity, thinking about being a leader. So all of those things, that's how I define a culture in a company. And I think that's one way that you can get everybody swimming in the same direction.
I like that. It's a good thing. One of the things I do, and I don't know if this is a I don't know if I should admit it. I individually talk to every single employee and say, who here is undervalued. Like there are people here that are doing way more. Like uh, a good example is I've met companies where the guy who has a tag of maintenance, the company can't run
Hmm.
without him, right? All the
Absolutely.
machine he fixes all the machines. He run, when things break, he runs out and gets parts when he's the glue.
Yeah, I've found that as well. I mean, you never know who that key person is. And it's kind of, and this last company is a good example of that. We have a warehouse person who really is the glue
Mhm.
because he's happy, he gets everything done, he talks to people, he knows everything inside and out.
Yep.
He's like a Wikipedia of knowledge for that. But he's not the person that you would normally assume
Right.
is that the key person.
Yep. There's one in every company, and that's one of the things I learned through all this interviewing and talking to companies we are looking at acquiring this stuff is somebody in that company is a nosy next door neighbor. Like if you think about a little neighborhood, I used to do a lot of real estate. When I buy a house in a neighborhood, I would always figure out who's watching me when I'm like checking the house, and I go make friends with her. I give her my card, right? She's the one that's called me in the middle of the night when somebody's moving out with that because they didn't pay rent. There's somebody in that company, in every single company, that knows everything there. They know where all the skeletons are. Make friends with the person, understand what's going on. I think it's huge beneficial, and for God's sake, don't lay them off.
Well, by extension of that, if you have any kind of social following, if you have, we used to have a lot of forums
Mhm.
in different niches. I actually got the idea from a book called The Tipping Point,
Yeah,
where there are some people in a community that are hyperactive. They know you can ask that person where the best restaurant is. They know everybody. They're well connected, and if you observe any kind of forum, there'll always be one or two people who are hyper helpful. They want to be involved. And we would wait for those people to develop, and then we would pay them as moderators. We'd say, listen, and it costs nothing. You say, here's $300, $500. Would you mind helping us moderate this? And they would basically take the thing over. They would be happy to because that's what they do.
one of the traits I find with most business owners is they keep employees around when they have the wrong butts in the wrong seats, right? And it's because loyalty issues. It's because their dad used to work for me or whatever. When you step into a company, do you see a lot of that where there's good? I don't think there's. I'll be honest. I don't think there's anything such thing as a bad employee. I just think some people would be better off flipping burgers at McDonald's than working for me. They're a good employee for somebody, but
I think, yeah, I think it depends. So if you look at a company like Upwork, you
mhm,
can hire outsource people. I've hired probably 1,000 people there, and but even when it was Odesk, and I still have a 4.8 or something rating out of 5
mhm,
because it's very clearly defined what I expect from them,
mhm,
and I would consider myself fair. So if something's not working out, I have a process that I'm going to work through before I let them go. But they know it's coming.
yeah,
I've asked you to do this, you didn't do it. Let's talk about it. Here's a goal. Okay, it's still not done. If it doesn't happen, then I'm going to let you go. You can find yourself, particularly in online businesses, where you're trapped because there's so many things in the internet that don't really have a definite job. Like, so that person might know a lot about that, how your websites are put together, or they've got some unique knowledge that is very hard to get rid of, and you have to work around them.
yeah,
So you don't want to cut your nose off to spite your face.
yeah.
You sometimes do have to have people keep them around until you grow out of them or retrain them. Offline is, I think, a lot easier in some ways to define what's expected and what's not expected. So what I try and do is to make every company and everything that I do into some kind of framework. It's a kind of measure what matters type thing where we've got, here's the objectives, here's your KPIs, here's what we're trying to achieve, and let's work with you until we agree that you have to achieve this. And if you're not achieving it, they get the message. It's not a surprise, but when you let them go. But ultimately, you've got to make a decision that, is it a business or is it a hobby? And if it's a business, you got to make those tough decisions. But ultimately, if you want to be in business, you got to be able to make those decisions.
And I agree, and I also see a lot of business owners when they've been in business for 15, 20 years, they have at least one to probably, depending on the size of the company, a few of people who are there surely because of loyalty and other reasons.
Sure.
They're not revenue generating, they're more of a pain than it's just
Is that so
maybe
wrong? I mean, if they can afford it, right? So I know that everything in the bigger companies you have, they measure the utilization of staff. How
yeah.
productive is somebody in an 8-hour day, for example? And they're not that productive. But one of the things that I've come to value the most is loyalty,
Oh, I
right?
yeah,
So there, um, if you're in business long enough, you're going to see it all. You're going to get
yeah.
screwed. You're going to make a lot of money. You're going to have ups and downs. But to have somebody who's there, who is, is 100% loyal, and you can say, listen, take my car in to get cleaned, or go talk to this guy and negotiate a deal, even though he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. If you're in that position where you can afford it, it's not that bad. If you're running on the kind of smell of an oily rag, that person's got to go.
I wanna circle back around because we talked about, picking people off of Fiverr and some of the other sources out there and how you lay that out. I'm a big fan of, outsource work and especially temporary work that I just need a project done. A lot of times we keep those people. It's a great resource to find people. Have somebody come in, do 2 or 3 projects, and all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, would you like a full-time gig here?" A lot of times you can find people. I like using onlinejobs.ph and some other stuff, just like Fiverr. But one of the things I've adopted, and we were talking about books and things you admire earlier, is, have you read Dan Sullivan's Who Not How?
Yes.
So he has a concept. A lot of people read the book, but they don't download the booklet that goes with it, the impact filter. I use that. It's a way he uses to define what you're trying to achieve, the vision you're trying to explain to the employee or the person doing it. Kind of like a mini project plan and measurement for success. What happens if you succeed? What happens if you fail? All in one little spreadsheet type of form. That's what I use to hire and run a lot of these outsource things. I give them an impact filter. It explains, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's what it looks like when it's done. Here's 8 ways that we're going to use to measure your success, or 8 steps to getting this done. Here's what it means to the world if you get it done, to us in a company, and here's what it means if we don't do this. And I think it's best laid out, simple, one pager I can give somebody, and it actually there's some spots in there on when I do it, there's spots in there where they have to forecast their own ability, right, and perform against that forecast.
Well, let me ask you, maybe it'd be interesting for your listeners. I mean, you've done over 100 podcasts in and around and talking about M&A. What do you think is the most important thing
I
about
think
an acquisition?
I'll hands down say rapport with the owner. Rapport, just the general term, rapport with the owner, with the staff. Understanding where and that the key in that rapport is listening to where what they're trying to accomplish and helping them get there. So that includes with the owner when he's trying to sell, that includes the staff when you take them on. If you don't do that, you're introducing all kinds of problems. A lot of people go into these deals and they're like, want to know the numbers and is it a great business or something like that. I don't even ask those questions until I kind of know where the owner's trying to get.
Mhm.
If the first 2 calls, the owner looks at me and goes, I want 3 million for my business. My natural response these days is cool, to see how we can get you there. And then we go back into what are they going to do with it? What is the plan? What is their envision? Because if I don't know that, I think more deals fail towards the end because they don't, the owners don't either don't have a vision for what's next, so they kind of get scared at the end, or they don't have trust in you towards the end, especially if you're doing anything creative, seller finance and stuff like that, because you just never spent the time to build deep rapport with them.
It's
And
very interesting. I mean, and that's a great point. Something I should listen to more. But during lots of conversations with companies, what I realized was that having those conversations initially was very hard. I'd get on a call and wait for the person to talk to me. I didn't realize they would expect me to talk, do all the talking. And then the second thing was they need a reason. They need a reason why you want to be talking to them about buying them. But the most important thing as you go through that due diligence is that one question that I would ask them: what's important to you in this process?
Mm.
And some people will say, I there is nothing too important to me. I'm just interested in getting rid of the business. A lot of people will say they're worried about the legacy of has had a business for a long time. So it's different things for different people.
Right.
But if you don't ask that, it always seems to be that thing that's missing that kind of relates to what you just said.
I 100% agree, and that's what I'm trying to get at. The first call, 2 call, 3 calls you even have with some of the owners, we'll get numbers because they naturally come up, people will tell you this stuff, but I'm more interested in of, like, "Tell me the story of what you built," right? But they
Mhm,
expect you to talk first, so you end up like, "Hey, why are we on the phone?" Like, you gotta give them that. So, "Look, I partner with, invest in, help people grow. I don't know where you're going or what in the world has you on the phone at 2 o'clock in the
mhm,
afternoon with a guy who buys and invests in a company, but I'm here to help you get where you're trying to go.
mhm.
So let's talk about that first before we go there. Could you tell me what you built here? Tell me all about the company. I've seen the website, I've seen the journalist, but what is it you've built here? I want to hear the story, and most people are proud to tell it. So they want you to know. And then I'm just insanely curious through the whole process. So if
I
somebody's
think that's it, Ron. I mean,
yeah,
you got to be curious. You got to be. I don't think you're going to be good at M&A or anything unless you actually are curious.
yeah.
I mean, I don't care whether you make mugs, coffee cups, or sell jumbo jets. I'm curious. I
Mhm,
really want to know how that thing works.
yeah. That's the and they wanna tell the story. They wanna make sure you get it because most people, most and they're right. Most business owners don't think if you don't get what they built and why they built it this way, you're gonna destroy it when you own it.
But let me ask you. I mean, if you've about all of these M&A people that you've spoken to, do you
Mhm.
think that what keeps them going? Because they reach a point where they have enough money, right? Why do it? Is it always about the money, do you think? Or is there what is that
I
thing that
think it's
makes
the
them want to
challenge.
do it?
It's the entrepreneurial spirit of a challenge and solving a problem, helping somebody get to another, to achieve things. There is some natural entrepreneurial thing to solve problems. There's also a natural entrepreneur thing that, like, if you're truly an entrepreneur, you make more money by figuring out what another human being wants and helping them get it. So when a business owner wants to sell or whatever, if a business owner comes to me and says, I want $3 million for your business, the natural instinct when I first started is like, cool, how did you come up with that number? That is a horrible question to ask because it puts them on the defensive. But when I
Mm,
say, cool, let's see how we can
that's a
get you
good
there.
point.
Right.
Something I'm guilty of, actually.
Yeah.
How did you get to that number?
Is that how I used to do it every call. How did you get to that number? And I'm like, "Well, my CPA told me that." It's like, "Okay, apples and oranges. Your CPA doesn't know how to evaluate businesses probably." Instead of saying that, it's like, cool. My natural response now is like, "Cool, let's see how we can get you there." And a lot of times the conversation is, "Oh, in order to get you to there, we're gonna have to grow you. The industry pays X multiple for companies. You're here
Mm,
and you
mm.
wanna be there." Right? So if you really need or want or feel like you deserve a $3 million exit, we can
That's an
get you there.
excellent
Yeah,
philosophy right
yeah,
there. And
yeah,
a point that I missed, and this is where I'm thinking you got to be the deal maker.
mhm,
So, I mean, that business might be worth 1 million and he wants three, but if you adopt the attitude, let's grow you there, you just
mhm,
opened up a whole new world.
yeah, and then the conversation becomes, "Okay, if I can get you to 3, and because that's where you think you're worth now, and in your mind, you go, "I can probably get him to 7. Can I take 50% of everything?" And be honest, if you think you can, and you go, "Can I take 50% of everything we get above 3? Can I come in as a partner? We work together." It's gonna take a little while, 18 months to 2 years, maybe 3 years even. Can you hold in that long? Can we work together? And, at the long run, that's the guys and I'm learning this from you guys, right? The people like you I bring on the show. Those guys are making money. Those guys are doing deals. I have a guy I'm talking to now that I'm friends with. We chat all the time. He shows up to my hangouts. I do hangouts for this industry. He showed up to the one this morning at 8 a.m. my time, even though it was like in the middle of the weird day for him in Europe. And he's done 10 deals this year alone, but they're all
That's a lot.
JVs, and a lot of it is like, let's see where these owners want to get. And he's really good at helping owners get where they want to go. And so that's the path I'm on now. Uh,
I was invited and asked to come into a negotiation. And this is another strange thing. They were negotiating for a business. I said, how much did they want for the business? They said, we never asked. And I thought, isn't that just weird? And it's not the first time it's happened to me. Somebody will be negotiating for a business, but they haven't asked the $1 million question, how much do you want? It's almost as if they're afraid to say it. So we're all in the three of us on this call, and the business was making $1 million EBITDA. And so I said, well, how much do you want for it? He says 23 million. And I said, okay, 23 million. I don't think that we should go any farther. And
But
I ended there's nothing you can do with that, right?
yeah, now you know so that you're in the reverse stage. When I'm telling you, like, it's cool to see how we can get you there, I don't know their EBITDA at this point. If I
Mm,
knew the number ahead of time, then it's a different conversation because we've now you're saying something that's so far-fetched, I'm like, "Am I
yeah.
wasting my time?" In the early stages of the conversation, if that number comes up in the first probably hour of the first call or maybe even on the second call and they've got a forecasted number, if I haven't seen your financials and know what your EBITDA is at this stage,
Mm.
probably my natural response is gonna be, "Cool, let's see how we can get you there." Once I know that, I can start going, "That's an interesting number."
And I think you get a sense, I don't know if you would agree, Ron, you get a sense when you've been talking to them whether they're real. In other
Mm,
words, if it's a guy who's owned that business and you know that he wants out and he's looking for that way, as opposed to somebody who's just trying to kick the tires to see if there's something real there.
you hit the nail on the head. So there's a question I ask, and I did this in real estate and I do it now. I say, "Look, I usually work with people who are trying to solve a problem. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 10, you would pay me to take this company, and 1, you're just seeing if I'm dumb enough to pay you 50 times what it's worth. Where do you
I
find
love that.
yourself motivated right now? Are you really like,
Mhm,
if I start to detect what you're talking about, I ask, I literally phrase it that way on a scale from 1 to 10, 10, you would pay me to take this company, you're done and you need out, you got cancer, something's going on in your life that you've got to get this on
mhm,
into somebody else's
mhm.
hands, right?
Yep.
And 1 is you've got an idiot on the other end of the phone that has a big checkbook and you think, "I'll stroke you a check for $50 million more than it's worth." Where do you fall? And you just have to and I game around with that, my sense of humor will allow it, but a lot of times people are like, "I would just kick and tie," they'll just come right out because 'cause they're called out on their BS at that point, right? And I
My
played
version of that is when I've talked to people, I kind of have a process that I go through now. And I
Mhm,
get to the point where I say to them, like, people, when we're at this stage, they generally fall into three categories. Category number one, they're not interested. Number two is they need help growing their business. Or number three, they want to sell. So if
mhm,
I asked you which one of those, where do you fall in? And they all self categorize
yeah.
themselves. But that's good. I like how you did it.
And I always follow up that when they say, "Well, I don't think I'm ready to sell it." Like, "Cool. I I'm only 50," but now I'm 51. "I'm only 51. I'll probably still be around when you're ready to. I'll probably still be buying companies when you're ready to. If not, my family trust will, my family office that I'm trying to build. If it ever changes, anything comes up, you keep my number, keep my card, we can do that. If you ever need help growing, I probably help you either be on your team to help you grow, be part of your company, like, be an advisor, kind of like a board member, because I'm not gonna pull 40 hours a week for your company. I have too many assets to do that. But
Mhm.
if you need help, I can probably help you, or I can probably point you to somebody that can help you. So if you ever need anything to move your game forward, let me know. Cool. So I think we covered a lot of stuff, man. How do people reach to you? What are the ways you want them to reach out? If somebody heard something today that resonated with them and they want to work with you, contact you, what's the best way they can do that?
The best way is just to go to my website, markmcrae.com. Hopefully, it'll be on the screen somewhere. And yeah, happy to chat with anybody who's interested in growing their business or
Mm,
they would like to have a chat about anything related to mergers and acquisitions. As I mentioned to you earlier on, I don't have anything to sell. I am planning to do something next year to help teach people who want to get into mergers and acquisitions. And again, they can get in touch with me through markmcrae.com if they want to talk about that.
cool. And that'll be 2024, right? We're recording this in
Yes.
2023 and towards the end of it. So this might come out in 2024. But when you say next year, you might have a program
Yes,
coming out in
January,
2024.
February 2024.
Okay, cool. So they get that at your website. I'll make sure that's in the show notes and it's on the screen if you're watching YouTube. It's underneath his name. So that's his URL. And one takeaway, if somebody can remember, all they remember from the entire hour, they listen to the show and they can only walk away with one memory of this end of you, what would you want them? What would be the key takeaway you want them to have?
Don't give up your dreams. Like I started off in a market in Glasgow, and I don't profess to be anybody's guru or to have trillions of dollars, but I've done very well. in this industry, and it's because I love this industry, and I think that it's important to give back.
Mhm.
So if you get one thing from this is you, if you have a dream, if you want to do something in business or mergers and acquisitions, it can be done. Don't let anybody put you off. There's a lot of people around. Listen to people like Ron, listen to podcasts that just learn about the industry and talk to people. You'll get there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate having you here today, and we'll call that a show.
Yeah, Ron, thank you very much for having us, and to your audience, anybody who listens, I appreciate that you took the time to do it. And maybe I'll have you in one of my podcasts one day.
I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.